Konnichiwa everyone. I'm Satori, and welcome back to the Japan exit. If I seem unusually quiet or look a little too deflated today, please know it's for a very specific reason. I just survived another full work week here in Tokyo. And today, we have to talk honestly about the reality many of us share. The sheer, soul-crushing, bone-deep exhaustion of working a full day, every single day, in a typical Japanese company environment. This type of exhaustion isn't just physical fatigue, it's a quiet suffering. A mandatory part of the job description that is never written down but deeply understood. My day always starts at an unforgiving 5:30 a.m., sometimes even earlier. It is not the time I begin working, but the necessary time I must start the critical process of being impeccably presentable. Even as a marketing manager in the fast-paced tech sector, the societal and corporate expectation of flawless appearance, the meticulous makeup, the perfectly styled hair, the neat dark suit is a silent, mandatory requirement of professionalism. This is what I call the pink tax on my time and energy. An extra 30 minutes of effort spent before the mental fight even begins. With the presentation complete, the next battle is the commute, which begins around 7 a.m. on the crowded Yamanote line. It's a crush of humanity, packed, silent, and airless. You are pressed against strangers, shoulder to shoulder, yet you have never felt more completely alone and isolated. This is the paradoxical reality of life in the big city. You stand there, unable to move, riding this wave of silent obligation. You arrive at the office already feeling depleted, needing a strong coffee and a nap, and the clock hasn't even hit 8:30 yet. That specific sinking dread you feel in the pit of your stomach while the train pulls into the station is your body's alarm system screaming. We are consistently heading toward Karoshi territory, Satori, and no one cares. The company officially starts at 9 a.m., but the unwritten rule dictates that you are expected to be physically at your desk by 8:30 a.m. This is a mandatory 30-minute block of unpaid early start time. This time is dedicated to preparing the workplace, checking in with senior staff, and simply looking incredibly diligent and ready to endure the day ahead, creating a facade of readiness. My role as a marketing manager should be strategically focused and driven by innovation, but the bureaucratic reality is that I spend the first hour and often much longer on tasks that add negligible value. One major soul-destroying pressure is the sheer mountain of physical paperwork. Everything, from a budget request to a simple document approval, still requires a hanko, or an official physical stamp, and multiple layers of signatures. This commitment to paper and stamps significantly slows down every single campaign decision we try to make, rendering us slow and inflexible compared to global competitors. The second pressure point is the culture of endless, drawn-out meetings, which are often just long, painful sessions that could have been summarized and handled efficiently in a single email. These meetings routinely involve 10 or more people when only 2 decision-makers are actually needed for the topic at hand. Because of this structure, I spend nearly half my productive day translating and explaining basic digital marketing concepts for people who are too senior or too comfortable in their traditional methods to understand the rapidly changing digital landscape. It is frustrating to constantly fight against an ingrained aversion to change and efficiency. The third and deeply frustrating hurdle is the exhausting 360-degree approval cycle that must be completed for every small initiative. Getting something as basic as a social media post approved requires sequential sign-off from legal, then public relations, and finally 3 different risk-averse department heads. It's a job designed not to create or innovate, but simply to be slow and entirely risk-averse, punishing any attempt at creativity or speed. And then, we must talk about the insidious layer of gendered pressure that women face daily. I distinctly remember a critical strategy meeting last month where I had spent a grueling week building a comprehensive market entry plan supported by extensive data, which I then presented professionally. I was met with complete silence and polite nods, nothing more. Immediately after my presentation, Mr. Tanaka, a junior male colleague who had just joined our team, presented almost the exact same market entry idea, but notably, with far less concrete supporting data than mine. Yet, the senior staff immediately began nodding, praising his fresh insight and strategic thinking. My comprehensive plan was effectively ignored, and I felt completely overlooked in a meeting where I should have been the expert. But what truly symbolized the issue for me wasn't the intellectual theft. It was what happened right at the very end of that 90-minute strategy session. The CEO, ignoring the critical discussion we had just had, looked directly at me, the only woman at the table, and asked, "Okamoto-san, can you quickly gather the used cups and arrange for the next meeting's tea service?" It may sound like a small, minor request to an outsider, but it's a constant, deeply demoralizing reminder of where you truly stand. You are professionally capable, highly educated, but your primary function in that room is still to quietly serve. You are perpetually expected to endure these slights, maintain a perfect, polite smile, and never cause any friction or make anyone in the male hierarchy uncomfortable. At 6 p.m., the official workday clock stops. However, 6 p.m. is precisely when the real, essential work begins. This is the notorious toxic reality of Service Zangyō, the completely unpaid mandatory overtime that forms the true backbone of the Japanese corporate structure. You simply cannot physically leave your desk because your immediate manager hasn't left the office yet. Likewise, you cannot leave because you see the office is still 70% full, and being the first person to leave is considered a major sign of being lazy or insufficiently dedicated to the team's goals. This creates a psychological, team-based hostage situation where everyone must stay put. I usually spend the productive hours between 6 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. doing actual high-value work, like analyzing complex market data and drafting strategic reports. But after 8:30 p.m., the work shifted dramatically. I would find myself endlessly proofreading reports for my manager, performing simple data entry tasks, or worst of all, waiting for a senior person to finish a call so I could ask one critical question that should have been answered hours ago. The hours were not about efficiency. They were purely about low-value endurance and maintaining the optics of being present. Adding to this immense time drain is the suffocating pressure to participate in the nomikai, the after-hours drinking parties. If you decline these social events too often, you are instantly labeled as not a team player or unwilling to integrate. But if you go, you lose another precious 4 hours of personal time, often spent having to maintain that perfect, quiet female presence while listening to drunk colleagues vent, requiring another massive investment of emotional energy for zero actual career return. The mental cost is immeasurable. Under this constant, relentless strain, my body inevitably started to break down. The continual, extreme stress resulted in chronic, debilitating headaches that often lasted for days. My back and shoulders constantly ached from sitting rigidly at my desk for 14 hours straight, day after day. By the time I would finally drag myself home around 10:30 p.m., I was too physically and emotionally spent to do anything for myself. I couldn't cook a healthy meal. I couldn't exercise to clear my mind. I couldn't even summon the focus to read a book or call a friend. My entire identity had been reduced to the perpetually tired marketing manager, a professional endurer, not a professional creator. That, I realized, is the real, heartbreaking tragedy of this work culture. You dedicate your entire 20s and 30s, pouring all your finite energy, your unique youth, and your intellect into a rigid corporate system that ultimately only sees you as a completely disposable cog and a quiet, compliant female cog at that. The return on investment for your personal life is catastrophically low. The feeling of loneliness became immense. A heavy blanket draped over my life. Everyone else in the office was going through the exact same bone-deep exhaustion, yet no one ever dared to truly talk about it or acknowledge the pain. Instead, You just smile politely, you nod in agreement, and you quietly die a little more inside every single day you comply. When I looked in the mirror, it often reflected a stranger, someone who looked conventionally successful on paper, well-dressed, employed at a major tech company but who was emotionally hollow, drained of personality, and devoid of genuine joy. That moment of clarity, the realization that I was trading my fundamental personal health, my passions, and my future for a salary that barely covered the immense cost of the stress I incurred was my true, major turning point. The existential question I had to confront was simple yet terrifying. What is the true, ultimate price of this quiet mandated endurance? For me, I determined that the price was clearly too high, and the time for change was urgent. I made the firm, liberating decision to quit that traditional Japanese company and start my own exit strategy. Quitting was undeniably one of the scariest and most disruptive decisions I've ever made, but it was also the most profoundly liberating. It represented an exit from the endless cycle of exhaustion and a powerful entry into a new life, finally allowing me to discover who Satori is outside of that confining company ID. Here's what I learned about actually making the Japan exit successful from a practical standpoint. First, preparation is key. I spent 4 solid months secretly and meticulously saving a substantial emergency fund, at least 6 months of living expenses, and carefully updating my resume while I was still employed and earning a stable salary. You must not quit until you are financially secure enough to take a deep breath and think clearly without immediate panic setting in. Second, you must know your rights. It is crucial to fully understand the labor law Rodo Kijunho. Generally, you are required to give 2 weeks' notice, but your contract might stipulate a month or more, so check it carefully. The most important thing is to understand your legal limit, so you do not feel pressured into staying indefinitely just to save face for the company. Third, look outside the box. When I searched for a new path, I specifically avoided looking for another traditional Japanese company in the same vertical. I focused my job search hard on foreign companies, dynamic startups known for better work-life balance, or even shifting into freelance consulting. The ultimate goal must be to leave the culture that caused the problem, not just the job title itself. Fourth, remember that the exit interview is for you, not them. Be professional and polite during your departure, but do not feel obligated to give away sensitive or overly critical details that could potentially be used against you or make you look bitter later on. The most important interview is the final one you have with yourself. What kind of life free from chronic exhaustion do I actually want to live going forward? If you are a woman, foreign, or Japanese, working hard in this corporate culture, dealing with Service Zangyō, the relentless nomikai pressure, or the sheer weight of quiet expectation, please, I truly need to hear from you and connect. What was your specific turning point? What finally gave you the courage to say I'm out? Share your story below in the comments. Hit the like button if this deeply resonated with your experience. Subscribe for more advice on successfully escaping the toxic work cycle, and I will see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves and your energy. Ja ne.